Hello, bread fans of all ages. If you know the sound of my voice, then you might know who this is. This is Jay of Insane Coaster Junkie, the guy that used to make all those big YouTube videos back in the day. Well, now I'm here in podcast form with my brand new podcast, Right on Track. Yes, I decided to come back to the podcast scenario because I've been having a little bit of a crave recently with my new career job and learning audio, and I figure why not get back to something that I tried before with podcasting. Now, if you follow my journey before, I used to have a podcast about 2 years ago called Junkie Talks, and that was kind of a stupidized version of a podcast trying to rival some friends at school back in the day. I basically swore too much. I basically did way too much at once, too quickly, and it just was a massive flop. So I decided to step back and do clean house with everything and return in a more appropriate form. And this podcast is going to operate a little bit similarly to the previous podcast, but I will also put my own twist in it with this unique brand. So right on track, we're going to be right on track this time. Make it good. So a little bit about myself, just in case you are unfamiliar on who I am as a person. My name is Jacob J. Zemanek, but you can just call me Jay. That's my nickname I use. I am a former YouTuber known as Insane Coaster Junkie that I did for about 10 years. I'm almost 25 years old, and I have about 143 roller coaster credits across the United States and Canada, with about 25 amusement parks under my belt. I am also a production assistant at a local news station. So I am learning camera and audio, which was also the inspiration for this podcast. If you would like to follow me outside of the podcasting world, you can do so in two forms. One of which will be my Instagram for my direct travels with everything, with ride counts and news updates and whatnot, at Jay Zemanek, and my YouTube, which hosted my former works and whatever new parks I may decide to go to in the future at Insane Coaster Junkie. So that's a little bit of my bio and talked about myself, but I really want to get into this first episode in a nice manner. And what a way to do that is explain my journey as a roller coaster enthusiast. Now, I would like to say I've been part of this thing for about a good part of a decade, but more so full-time within the past 5 or 6 years. But I'll talk about everything that came up to it, past, present, and future. So this is more of a relaxed form, so grab your popcorn, or if you're driving, please focus on the road, get on the turnpike, and let's go. So we're going to start our journey in a little bit of an odd context here. Let's go back to the early 2000s here. Where were you during that time? Some of you were born, some of you were just a few years old, some of you were in college or high school, some of you might have kids already. But me, let's go back to 2003. The opening of Splash Lagoon in Erie, Pennsylvania, the indoor water park, a brand new concept at the time. Now, I do have old pictures in my archives at Waldameer in the early days, but one of my most distinct memories comes from 2003. The water park just opened, and I am there for a family party. And 3-year-old me is terrified. I looked at the Monkey Shines Island and Little People activity pool back in the day and thought that was the most terrifying thing ever. I refused to go down to the slides, and I know looking at it now, an 18-inch pool, that's just child's play. But me, I have autism, and I'm on the autism spectrum. A lot of things do misfire from time to time, so my perception of height was way off balance. So I was just kicking and screaming, throwing a tantrum in public, just trying to get my way out of it. And my family was just trying to push me. Come on, you can do it. You can get on the water slide. Little did I know, after a lot of pushing and pulling and shoving and everything else in between, I decided to face my fear and get on those little slides on Monkey Shines Island. One little dip into the pool later, I was hooked. There you go. And that kind of was the precursor to everything. And it will make a lot more sense later once we come full circle. And some of my favorite rides back at Waldameer during the day of this early 2000s arc were some rides like Skyfighter, the Pony Cars, Umbrella Ride, Big Rigs, Little Toot, stuff like that. Other rides like Frog Hopper and some of the family rides that terrified me back in the day but those would be conquered in due time. And I remember I would ride my first roller coaster, this is a distinct memory, at the age of 5, which would be Ravine Flyer 3, which is the E&F Miler kiddie coaster of the park. It's a small little kids coaster that travels around a little pond twice. And nowadays, about 20 years later, it's nothing too special at this point. It's a standard kiddie coaster that can be a little rough around the edges. But at 5 years old back in the day, this was the greatest thrill ride of all time. But however, as the years went on, I would like to call this the Insane Coaster Junkie deadlock from about 2009 to 2014. A period of time where fear was right there front and center. I would not do anything in my power to get on rides. So, how would this happen? 2009, our family would start doing annual Christmas trips to Splash Lagoon. This was a great time to come back and revisit the water park after my terrifying experience back in 2003. However, the only slide I would be willing to try at the age of 9 was Maui Wowie, the little open body slide in the treehouse. And I loved that thing to death. And I would only ride that, and the lazy river and the activity pools, obviously, but I wouldn't ride anything bigger than that. I was encouraged, but I refused. And I would be switching back and forth with Waldameer, trying new rides every now and then. I mean, some of my favorite rides going into the 2010s was stuff like Paratrooper, Scrambler, the merry-go-round, train, etc., etc. And this would be a back and forth balance. 2010 comes around, and I would be tried again with the next family trip. This time in the challenge, Black Hole, which is the other slide in the treehouse at the time. It's a little body slide that's enclosed in the dark. And my common excuse before riding that thing was, oh, I am terrified of the dark. Which, as a little kid, is a justified opinion, yeah, and a justified fear, but nowadays it's, common sense not to really think about that as an excuse. And I ended up loving Black Hole. Let's go to 2011 now. The Flying Swings was the big new ride at the time, and I would ride that with great force. As well as the 2 new kids rides in the park too, SS Wally and Wendy's Tea Party. But at Splash Lagoon, this is where the big thing happened. My sister and my cousin told me I need to be a man and try these new slides. So I went on a bombshell here, and I did 4 water slides there. Big Kahuna, Cyclone, Python Plunge, and Shark Attack. This was a big deal at the time. My first tube slide, my first bowl slide, my first extreme body slide. It was a lot to take in, but I ended up loving everything about it. But there was one thing at that water park that was missing. Hurricane Hole. But I was happy to do everything else in the water park at that time, and it got me more confident. 2012 comes around for the Waldameer season. Yes, I tried their new kids ride, Happy Swing. Yes, a 12-year-old riding a new kiddie ride. Please do not judge me. Things were different back then. And I would try some of the bigger rides such as Thunder River, Wipeout, and Comet, which was a big deal because I don't remember riding Comet back in the day when I was younger. 12 years old was the one time that I could distinctly remember riding Comet for the first time. But I ended up enjoying Comet and some of those smaller rides. And I would go back to Splash Lagoon for the last time for the family vacations, and nothing would just change. I would still do the same song and dance with all the rest of the water slides. Hurricane Hole was left to itself until 2013, my 6th grade trip to the water park. And this was pretty much in the time where everyone told me, you need to ride this water slide. Hurricane Hole was downright intimidating. And even to this day, it can still be intimidating to a little extent. But it's this extreme body bowl slide that drops you in 6 feet of water at a speed of 40 miles an hour. I thought I was terrified at the time. And I remember I got all the way up to the same tower that Cyclone and Big Kahuna are, looked at that thing, and backed out. And that was one of the only times I can ever recall backing out on a water slide. However, at Waldameer, things would change and pick up. New for that year was the Music Express ride, that little Himalaya-style ride. But I would also try some other things like Wacky Shack, Mega Vortex, and some of the other bigger thrill rides. And it was just inch by inch, getting more rides, getting more comfortable with the song and dance. But however, kind of like Splash Lagoon leaving something behind, there were 4 rides in particular at Waldameer that were left hanging. Steel Dragon, Alibaba, Ravine Flyer 2, and X Scream. That would be solved very soon. But before that season would end, I would try the water park at Water World for the first time in many, many years. I can't remember, probably a decade, but I really enjoyed the water park at 13. That was where I got to ride a lot of the major slides, including the defunct Freefall and Speed slides, which kind of counteracts with not riding Hurricane Hole, because technically the Freefall Speed slides that used to operate there were more extreme than Hurricane Hole, but I digress. But then 2014 came around, and this is where I would pretty much pull on my big boy pants and basically said, I'm a big kid now. And June 22nd, 2014 would be that exact day. And I would ride 3 of those 4 things. Steel Dragon, Alibaba, no big deal. But where it really came to shine was Ravine Flyer 2. I rode Ravine Flyer 2 for the first time, and I really loved it. And this was the time where I said, I really love roller coasters and amusement parks. However, there was still one more ride at Waldameer that stopped me. X-Scream. I didn't ride it back in June. A month later in July, I would return to the park, and quietly I would do X-Scream for the first time. It was terrifying, but to me, at 14, yeah, that was terrifying. But I ended up loving it. And all the rides at Waldameer, as well as the water park, were complete, except Splash. After that whole Ravine Flyer 2 spectacle, I was very interested, and I wanted to make a YouTube channel out of it. And there were channels that I watched back then, like I said, R-Flyer 01, Coaster Force Theme Park Review, and a brand new one in my face, Coaster Studios. These were the inspirations for me to start a channel. So, on a very snowy day in 2014 in my grandparents' basement, boom, I made my YouTube channel. And it was called Cedar Talc 15. But I had nothing to record with. I have nothing to do with it. So for my 15th birthday, I got a tablet and whatnot, and I started making videos shortly after my birthday that year. And I would start making videos right off the bat. And my longest standing video, which is almost eclipsing 10 years at this point, is the very first construction update of the park I've ever done with the wave pool. This wave pool would be the largest expansion in Waldameer's history since Ravine Flyer 2. And I was super excited to cover it. Even though I didn't really get far, and the Ridge Center was the only place I could do, it was still a big deal to see Waldameer in the off-season. I would do a little band outing tramp to Splash Lagoon. And this was the time where I said, you know what, just cross it off the list. I already did the Freefall Speed slides about a year and a half prior. Let's do Hurricane Hole. And I went right there, and Hurricane Hole became one of my favorite water slides for many years to come. And this comes to the 2015 season. And that's where I started getting footage inside the park. May 16th, 2015. And I did like this 35-minute video in total of a bunch of rides at the park, such as Wacky Shack, Comet, Thunder River, stuff like that. And I kind of credit that video as the way to kickstart my YouTube and explore other mediums. June of that year, I would go to Waldameer and ride things, and this is where I would actually do some videos. My longest standing one from that is a reverse POV of Elruth Express in the back car. This was a video that was very popular back in the day. I remember that day too. It was a 50-degree day, it was raining, the park closed early. I didn't even do the water park, it was so cold. I did everything in the park that I wanted to do. A month later, I would revisit the amusement and water park properly for the opening of the wave pool. This would be the first time I would ever cover a new attraction in the park on video. However, during that time, I would explore other parks, and this one new park came to my mind, Conneaut Lake Park. I have to credit my grandparents where credit is due. Conneaut Lake Park is just about an hour south of Erie. It's this now troubling park, but now back in the day, it was actually on a slight uphill climb after another bankruptcy threat. Blue Streak would be my first coaster outside of Waldameer, and if you count it, which I personally do, Devil's Den as well. So that's 2 extra credits there. And Blue Streak would be a really fun coaster at the time, riding in the back row. And this was back when Blue Streak ran with the 4th car, so the airtime was astronomically good. And this was back also when they didn't have seatbelts, just the buzz bar. After that, there wasn't really much to explore. But however, there would be one park in particular that would change everything that I would see about amusement parks. August 21st, 2015. Darien Lake. And I remember my very first coaster there was Boomerang. this was intimidating. A very, very new concept to me, because looking at this park, I didn't know what to expect going in. But after seeing this, my family thought I would never ride anything at this park because there were coasters that went upside down, very high and fast. I wouldn't handle it. But I got on the back row of Boomerang, even though there were a few swears. That thing was incredible at the time. And Boomerang would become my first inverting coaster ever. And I would follow suit with Mind Eraser and Viper. And I would kind of just go down the line a little bit, tackling some of the other coasters like Predator, my first launch coaster with Moto Coaster, and then the big Goliath himself, Ride of Steel. And I remember I was very hesitant on this at first. Very, very hesitant. This would be my first hyper coaster over 200 feet tall. And I almost did it, but there's something that my grandfather told me back then, and it still applies today when I travel, and whenever he hears about my travels, it's still applied today. You gotta ride it. If you don't ride it, you're gonna sit there and regret it for the rest of time, because you never know if you will ever return to said place.
That's what she said.
The advice is, just do it. Kind of like Shia LaBeouf. I know, old meme aside, but it's basically the old-timey way of saying you need to do this, or else you're never gonna see this park again. And it worked. Ride of Steel, I ended up doing it twice, and I really much enjoyed my rides on it. And I would end off the season with another visit to Waldameer, and the end of the 2015 season. And then the next year came. I would do even more updates at Waldameer, this time covering their kids zone that would be added. However, I would end up attending my very first opening day at that park, May 7, 2016. And this was a huge deal to me because opening day I never really got to do ever. And I would actually meet some people that would actually be influential both as a person and as a content creator. With my friends Jared and Gabe, who I'm actually still good friends with to this day. I ended up meeting these two because they were big fans of my content and wanted to meet me. So we ended up hanging out, and it was a great time. And I would continue going to Waldameer. I only would go 2 more times that year, once in July and once in August. And kind of seeing this theme, this was around the time where I didn't really have a season pass to the park. I just didn't.
What?
I don't know what the reason was. But I would not end up getting the season pass until the following season. So 2016 was the last year I would actually go only about 2-3 times a year. And then after that, meeting up to them, I met up with Jared again. There was another park that I would end up going towards, Carowinds. This was something I announced back in my original construction update in 2016. And this was during a mission trip down to Morganton, North Carolina. And our free day, suggested by yours truly, wanted to go to Carowinds. Pitched this to our parish leader, she agreed, and all of us ended up spending a great time at Carowinds. And there were some big coasters there at the time. Fury 325, Intimidator, and much, much more. And I would do every credit at that park, well, except Lucy's Krabby Cabby, now known as Wilderness Run. But I would do every credit besides that, and it was great to go to this park. 2 days later, I would return home and go to Darien Lake with my uncle and ended up doing a concert there, which would kind of start a little side tradition during the summer called Concerts and Coasters. But 2016 was a very small season. I only went to that one new park with Carowinds, did a couple visits to Waldameer, and that was about the status quo. But 2017 would be a huge deal for me because a brand new attraction was in the works with the Battle of Lake Erie, but I would also get a huge camera upgrade thanks to my dad and with a new GoPro. And this would be kind of a Kickstarter to actually filming higher quality videos at the park and much more. I'd be doing higher quality construction updates and then fast forward into the actual season on-ride POVs. Because Waldameer is one of those rare parks in the country that actually allow on-ride filming on their rides, as long as you have a secured 5-point chest mount. I remember my very first ride, opening day 2017, in the front row, 42 degrees in the rain, with that chest mount. And I thought I was just on cloud 9. A couple months later, I would just keep going to Waldameer because that's when I had my season pass now. It was great. And then I got to the new park. My new park of 2017 would end up being Hershey Park. Spent 2 days there, family vacation. It was great on getting all the coasters such as Sky Rush, Great Bear, Fahrenheit, Storm Runner, Lightning Racer, and the ill-fated Wildcat. So I would add a lot more credits to my list, and this is where I kind of was starting to take things a lot more seriously than I did before. I would return back, and I would actually return to 2 parks that I originally did in 2015. First would be Darien Lake, then after that, the very next day, Conneaut Lake Park. 2017 was a very solid year. Yeah, still one new park, but I had a lot of technical upgrades and a lot more things that really shaped the modern ICJ right there. Starting in 2018 was a big deal because we had another family vacation to Universal Orlando, of all places. And this was a big deal. My first time flying. Getting to Universal was awesome, trying some really unique dark rides. And the coasters at the time, which Velocicoaster and Hagrid's were not even a thing at that point. They were still demolishing after the Dragon Challenge. This was a kind of a weird time to go to Universal, where Hulk and Rip Ride Rocket were the best rides in the park. After that, I would do a little small fairground in Cleveland, Ohio, which was the soon-to-be ill-fated IX Indoor Amusement Park. And then I would get back to Waldameer. And this time to Waldameer was actually one of my biggest times back at the park, because opening day was one of my biggest, most important days of my life, because I would actually get interviewed by the news for a segment they were doing at the time called Behind Closed Doors, Waldameer's Wonder. And funny enough, it would be the same news station that would eventually hire me many years later, so things do come full circle in a little bit. I got to talk about the park, some of the behind the scenes and whatnot, why Waldameer is one of those most popular parks that people should check out. And then that was also the most amount of times I rode Ravine Flyer 2 in a day up to that point with 32 rides. So I was very, very impressed with that. Fast forward a little bit, that's where I would go to another new park. And this park would change everything. Yeah, I would end up going to Cedar Point finally in 2018 with Jared for the very first time. This park blew my expectations away. And Steel Vengeance was the big mean new ride at the time. So getting on an RMC obviously is going to be a blessing. But it was a big deal to get to that park. And it pretty much said I can pretty much do anything and everything with that channel and with my life. So travels really came and went. And I would end up doing one more additional new park that year, which would be a small one, but it would be Midway State Park. And that would just get into my love of plus ones and hitting travels. But about 5 new parks in 2018, about 26 new coaster credits. I never did traveling like that ever before, and I thought that could never be matched. And 2018 was actually an important year in terms of the videos I made, because the videos that I would make really did shape up in that. 2017, 2018 was kind of the peak of the How to Ride series on the channel, where I'd instruct people on a step-by-step guide to ensuring a ride on Ravine Flyer 2.
Stop it. Get some help.
But I would also do my modern style vlogs. I kind of did that with Darien Lake when I returned there for another concert. But I would also return to Cedar Point once again and make some big vlogs out of it. Plus Waldameer throughout the season. It was a good season at the park. I had a lot of fun. The new rides they added that year, which was Balloon Race and Cannonball, solid new additions to the park. Getting a new kids ride was a nice touch. And Cannonball, obviously it was about time to add a third slide to that big tower that was standing there. But the 2019 season would be a huge step forward for my channel and my personal life. For the first time since 2015, I would visit Splash Lagoon with a friend of mine, and it was a great time just to get back to the water park, and I would just be filming there too. However, there was one thing waiting in the wings. It was their new ride at the time, Chaos. Chaos is this pendulum ride, if you're not familiar, that spins around and goes upside down, which was the first ride at Waldameer to go upside down in years, decades actually. So this was a big deal and a huge hyped up ride for the park. And I would finally ride it on Season Pass Photo Day 2019. And it actually felt good because I was actually the first public rider on it. Me, Jared, Gabe, we all joined forces to try this new attraction. And it ended up becoming one of the most important attractions I ever covered on that channel. Even to this day, almost 6 years later, it has 28,000 views. I'm still thankful for it because this was an important step in Waldameer's history, and for me to document that was a giant leap forward. And I would end up doing a lot more revisits this year too. Conneaut Lake Park for the first time since 2017, my first rides on Blue Streak since 2015, and this was pretty much the prime of Conneaut Lake Park. That's where I would do a huge marathon on Blue Streak. That would be the most amount of rides on any single coaster for the longest time, with 61 rides. And that was also the first time I tried their Halloween event. But I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. But Conneaut Lake Park was massively stretched and expanded. Darien Lake also returned. Cedar Point also returned. But I would add 2 new parks to the list in 2019, both of which would be important. The first one would be actually, at the time, was one of the worst parks I ever visited, which was Kennywood.
What?
Yes, the park that I religiously make as a second home park used to be one of the worst parks back in 2019. And again, kind of like Universal, I went at an awkward time because Steel Curtain was still under construction and Skyrocket was still closed from its malfunction in 2018. So I got to miss on some key things. But Phantom's Revenge and the wooden coasters did make up for it. I still had that vlog on my channel with Jared for my first visit. But I just remember Kennywood not being that great of a park back then, which is a crime to say nowadays. But Kennywood would end up becoming one of my favorite parks down the road. And the other new park would actually be my first ever time going international, which I don't know if you really call it international because it's still on the same continent, but I would go to Canada with my uncle and try out Canada's Wonderland. Imagine yourself, an autistic adult at 19 years old, standing there going to this park alone. It worked. I did pretty much everything that I wanted to do. Sucks that I missed out on a couple credits. That whole trip with Darien Lake and Canada's Wonderland back to back, known as Tri-C, was pretty much the peak of my Insane Coaster Junkie and my enthusiast career. I thought I was on cloud nine. Everything was working out. The Waldameer season was a huge success too. I mean, I also even graduated high school, my alma mater, Harbor Creek.
That was easy.
Everything was just right in the place. And I would be going to college too in the fall to study cinema. So everything was going right as they should. However, during that off season and later extent down the line, after the Waldameer season ended, this was what I would call the downfall of my channel and the downfall of myself. But 2020 didn't start off that way. 2020 actually started the way 2019 kind of left off, a huge visit to Splash Lagoon. But later on, I would do a construction update at Waldameer on a certain Wednesday in March. But little did I know when I was doing that construction update, most of the world would be actively shutting down because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Super virus.
This pandemic screwed everything over in terms of me and everything else. Everything that you loved about amusement parks, travel, and whatnot, just get that off the door. Because pretty much traveling was not essential at this point. You got to stay inside, mask up everywhere. It was a scary time for me. I mean, I was forced to quit my channel multiple times, actually. And little did I don't know what was going to be the future of the channel. That construction update, I was very optimistic about riding their new attractions that year. I was in an uncertain point in my life. Plus, it would make things worse. A couple months later, I get into a near season-ending accident on my bike after getting hit by a car. Now, I would prefer not to get into those details because that still haunt me to this day. However, that accident kind of just lowered my confidence even more. And even my personal life, too. I was kind of just in a dead zone there. Bruh. Eventually, they would get their things out of their ugly head, and both Waldameer and Splash Lagoon would open for COVID, which I would experience both. And this kind of where things went south for things, unfortunately. Splash Lagoon was kind of the worst of it because everything went south of it. Things were changed. The way they handled COVID, honestly, was not the greatest way. And I still kind of feel the after effects of COVID with that water park years later. Waldameer thankfully didn't really have much of that. I mean, we had a very shortened season from 4th of July to Labor Day, so about 2 months. But I was able to get back to the park and try out their new attractions, Whirlwind, the new roller coaster that was somehow added, and Rally Racer, the new mat racing slide. So I only filmed a couple videos that year, but I really wanted to milk it dry. That was kind of my point, which was a bad idea. And this is kind of where my burnout period would come in. I would experience so much burnout that after that Waldameer vlog in 2020, I'm like, this is a solid ending to the season. We'll see what 2021 happens. That off-season kind of just took a nosedive. I was struggling in school. My life was pretty much in shambles. I was having issues with people. It just was not working out. And I pretty much hit rock bottom. And somehow or some way, I would get back into Waldameer in 2021. And this was kind of a strong return to the park. And basically, during this time, I basically cut off the toxic people in my life. I actually switched majors from cinema to journalism because I was pretty much close to flunking out of school. And then pretty much clean house with everything. I would decide just to do a new editing style. I would talk with Ryan of the Rye Guy, who I was friends with during the season. He'd give me some tips about some editing and some new tools I could use. And I basically said, let's just start from scratch and move on. And that ended up working because the new style actually really ended up working out in the long run. Waldemere was a good one. And I would actually visit a couple parks to get back into my Rootin' Toot groove. Conneaut Lake Park was one of them, and Cedar Point was the other. Even though the 2021 season didn't really have much on the channel because this was kind of like the COVID after effects. Staffing was a huge issue in the park. There were some budget cuts that had to be made, so things did feel a little rough on the edges. But again, coming back post-pandemic, everywhere was experiencing this. So my channel was obviously, we're going to have some growing pains as well. But 2021 would be an important year for another reason, because this would be actually the first time I actually started working at the park. Now, I know you might be saying, is cleaning bathrooms really that fun? Yes. I'm not going to get into detail due to company policy, but I would do 3 seasons of cleaning, and I would actually really enjoy my employment at Waldemere. Everything about that park and just working there now felt fresh. It felt like I was welcome there. All those years of filming at the park as a YouTuber and a guest and as a season pass holder would translate well into employment status. And the new major coming off of that for the fall season actually worked. I would start learning a lot more new things with video and audio, so things were lining up, and I would try some new things with editing styles, try some live streams, whatnot. I did a lot of things internally to go out externally. It's kind of like making park improvements. You got to make park improvements to your infrastructure to expand in the long run. And 2022 would be that prime return, because I would do a lot about that. I would continue that same style. Even though I took a gap semester, I would change a little bit of things around. And one of my most proud moments actually came a few weeks after the season opened, where I got to tour Wacky Shack with a friend of mine, Specs, and the rides manager at the time. And we got to explore the dark ride, got to do a huge walkthrough, the history, how it operates. And I have a 26-minute video on my channel explaining everything, but it's one of my most important videos since COVID. Walking through Wacky Shack was one of my life goals, and even though I wouldn't learn it from an operator perspective, I get to learn it from a behind-the-scenes perspective. And it was one of my most proud-possessed projects I've ever done. And 2022 would be a big deal because I would return to a lot of parks too. Darien Lake was one of those, the first time since 2019. Kennywood was another one too. That would rise to the ranks. And I only would do about one new park this year, which was a small park in Cranberry Township called Fun for All. And even though it's not a big deal, any new park going forward was a big deal. And Waldemere was a huge deal too, getting the most amount of rides on Ravine Flyer 2 in one season. Even though 2022 wasn't a lot, it was still a lot in the internals as well. Doing a lot to fine-tune yourself to be where you are. And this is where I kind of was saying, this is where modern ICJ is now. I do a little things here and there that make myself known. And even though the old me did not work, the new me, of course, worked. Because 2023 would be one of my biggest seasons to date. To start the 2023 season, I was already coming off doing Edinburgh Essentials, the campus TV station. But I would even jump more hurdles with my radio show, Midway Madness. And this ended up becoming very popular for about 3 semesters. It was one of my prized projects that I've ever worked on. But the new stuff that I did was awesome. I would end up visiting a lot of new parks, and I would return to a lot. Waldemere was a big one, though. This would be my last year on Clean Team for now, but it was also the most important project, probably in my channel history and in my life. Yes, Ravine Flyer 2 happened, yes, Chaos happened, but I think the most important project that I ever covered on this channel was Rocket Blast, the water coaster. Because this was the last ever project that Mr. Nelson ever designed, and he would die a couple of weeks after the park season opened, so there was a bit of a devastating blow, but this attraction would be dedicated posthumously to him. It actually would win the Golden Ticket Award for the best new water attraction of the year. But the collab with Waldemere and ProSlide on this project and document it for you guys was a huge deal. And this actually came literally a week after an injury. So if I had a nickel for every time I had to cover a water attraction at Waldemere after an injury, I have 2 nickels, so a dime. Nope. Which is weird that it happened twice, but it happened twice, actually. There would be a lot of parks I would get back to. Cedar Point was the main one, Midway State Park, Darien Lake was the other, Erie County Fair, and I do a lot of fairs too, and some off-season stuff. But I would visit a lot of new parks this year too. The first big one would actually be Niagara Amusement Park in Grand Island, New York. But I would also try 3 small parks in Ohio with Memphis Kiddie Park, Fun Times Fun Park, and Sluggers and Putters. the late of that year was actually one of my biggest strikes. This is where I would announce I would retire from YouTube.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Retire from YouTube was a big deal at the time because I was starting to experience a lot more burnout. Like, I was enjoying YouTube and everything about it. I got to meet so many people throughout the years. A lot of them I'm still good friends with to this day. I got to do some of the best videos of my career. I got to travel to a lot of places and be the enthusiast I am today. But at the same time, I was getting burned out. I was getting tired. I was wanting to give up on this channel. But I wanted to announce that this season would be my biggest. And I, rightfully so, at the end of the Waldemar season at least, released one of the, pretty much the biggest video of all time in my channel history. Last Red 3 Lux Eterna Inamorata. This 92-minute video. And even though there are a lot of people that I don't associate myself with anymore because I've decided to change things about my life and whatnot, Last Red 3 was the biggest video project I ever did. And it was one of the most important projects in channel history. To gather a bunch of people for 3 days and to end off a legacy like that. It was the right way to go. Last Red 3, regardless of who's in it or what I did or how I filmed it or edited it, is one of the best videos I have ever produced. And that's where I would quietly just go right off into the sunset. I would do 2 new parks, which would be Six Flags Over Georgia and Fun Spot Atlanta, which actually around that time, that's where I actually got my 100th roller coaster credit with Goliath and Over Georgia. But after that, I pretty much just quietly rode to the sunset, kind of like a Peyton Manning type story. I was in senior year of college at the time. A lot of things were going at my side. I got a digital marketing job at school, so getting into my career, what I really wanted to do in life. But I would like to call 2024 and the rest of it
Epilogue.
Because even though I'm pretty much mainly retired, I still want to make content the way I want to, whenever I want. Whatever new parks I ended up going to, those are going to be ones documented. Other than that, and other than getting the yearly Waldemar update, that's about it. In 2024, this was a huge season for me in terms of traveling. Yes, I did a lot of returning parks, but I would do a fair share of new parks too, such as Idlewild, Seabreeze, Knoebels, and the 4 parks I did in Florida with the 2 Fun Spot parks, SeaWorld Orlando and Busch Gardens Tampa. This year would probably be my finest work in terms of like a journalism perspective. Traveling to these new parks gave me newfound love and respect about parks and filming and how to do them properly. And I basically just said, this is where I'm going to do whatever I want when I want. In 2024, even though I didn't really make a lot, the videos I did last an impact. And I would celebrate 10 years on YouTube this year as well. I would also graduate college with my bachelor's in journalism. I did a lot that year as well, outside of it. I would actually even try the rides department at Waldemar for the first time. Sure, at the end of the day, rides is not for me from a mental health perspective, and my lovely folks at the park understand why I would want to go back to a cleaner arc. At least I tried. Being a ride operator taught me a lot of new things too, and got me even more involved in the amusement industry. And for the first time ever in 2025, they're adding more rides to the park with Time Twister and the retirement of Spider. So I have another new attraction that I gotta cover that's important in the park's lineup. So where are we today? 2024 going into 2025. We have a lot on our belt here. Celebrating 10 years as a content creator has been a wild ride for me. It's been a lot of blood, sweat, tears, car breakdowns, injuries, relationship problems, both family and romantic. There was a lot that I struggle with. I don't care how many views something gets. I don't care how many clicks I get or the traction or the fans or whatever it is. As long as I have a small circle around me, I'm pretty much living life to the fullest at this point. 2025 will be a big year for me. Yes, I have a lot of goals. Will all the goals be met? Probably not, because I have a couple of crazy ideas in my head that I'm not going to announce at this time. But I do have some rather insane ideas, concepts to do, and whatnot. This podcast kind of is the first step into that new ideas for 2025. Yes, being released in 2024 technically, but this is the first part of my project 2025. Not the controversial presidential one, but my version, or as I like to call, Taylor's version. And what I'm doing right now, I'm pretty much in my best spot ever. And yes, technically, you're going to be saying, "Oh, you are retired from YouTube. You should stop doing this. This is childish. Grow up." And to that, I'm just going to say, just shove it down with a 10-foot pole. If someone out there is not a fan of somebody's work, just don't bash them. Just go find someone that satisfies your needs. That's all I'm just asking. Not everything is going to suit everybody. Not everything's going to satisfy all tastes. So I have a lot of ideas that I want to do with this podcast, and I have a lot of things that I want to try. Will everything work out? Probably not. There are going to be things that don't work out, but the things that I've been doing have been working out. I've been very fortunate to cover amusement parks for the past 10 years and try a lot of things. I've been, again, 143 roller coasters, 25 amusement parks across 2 countries. I mean, who at 24 years old has said has been skydiving twice, has been a ride operator and working at a park actively for about 4 seasons, and now is a well-established production assistant at a news station. And on the autism spectrum. Not many people can say that, but I do. And this is my story, and I want to tell more of my story to you. So I hope you have enjoyed this podcast and everything about it, and I am looking forward to potentially doing more episodes in the future. So wherever you might be sure to be right on track. Lux Eterna in Emerna. This has been Jay of Insane Coaster Junkie, and we'll see you all in the parks very, very soon.